Hey, my name is Josh Korak, and I'm a mental health counselor, podcaster, and teacher in the Denver metro area. In this space, I get the chance to interview professionals in the field and others from all walks of life as we talk about a variety of mental health topics. With this show, I ask you to join me in doing what one of my favorite philosophers, a Buddhist monk, Thich Nhat Hanh says: smile, breathe, and go slowly. This is Care with Korak. Hey everyone, welcome back to Season 3 of Care with Korak. I'm really excited to share all of the really great guests I have for you guys this time. I'm really glad you're listening. This season, we're going to be talking about so many really fun topics. I had a lot of fun with all my guests this season, as I usually do. But this season, we're going to be talking about all sorts of different things like trauma. We're going to get heavy. We're going to get real with it. We're talking about psychedelic therapy in an episode, eating disorders, existential philosophy, dating apps, shame and grace, and a handful more. It's going to be really hard maybe, but really fun in a lot of ways. I have a group of episodes to release. I may end up scheduling a few more episodes as time goes on and as the season goes on, and maybe release another half of the season. We'll just kind of have to wait and see. Unfortunately, some of my guests that I wanted to schedule, we're still trying to figure out times to do that. So I still may have a few more for you guys on top of what I already have coming out. Unfortunately, part of the reason it's taken me so long to release again, I've been running into a variety of editing issues. Last season, I took a chance in trying out video podcasting, which is very much outside of my knowledge base and my skill set. This whole podcast really is, and so I've been having a lot of fun learning, and man, I just still have a lot to learn. And so it ended up working well for the online interviews, like today's interview, and the video looks great and the audio looks great. Not so much for the in-person, unfortunately. So I did a little research last season, and I tried it again for this season. And so unfortunately, it looks like I still have some learning to do there. I've been able to connect with some new friends who are teaching me some new ways to record video. So hopefully if I end up doing another season or another half of the season, you'll get some really good quality video podcasting, which I know can be fun. But for now, with a handful of the in-person interviews that are going to be releasing, unfortunately, the audio and video are just not syncing up well for some of them. And it's a little bit beyond my control at this point to really get that looking good. And so unfortunately, it doesn't look the best. Audio still sounds great. But I think I'm still going to be including a video regardless, as I think it can sometimes still be fun to get an idea of who's talking. But just as a preface, I'm still working on that. Couple life updates. I'm on track for full licensure as a professional counselor, hoping to be fully licensed by the end of January, which, man, I'm just really excited for. We opened up a new office in Erie, Colorado. I'm actually at that office right now. And so that's been really fun to kind of service a new area of Colorado. I also started teaching my first college class this semester, which has been a lot of fun. And another barrier into releasing more episodes, but in a good way. And so I'm going to continue with that next semester, it sounds like, which I'm really looking forward to. So other than that, I've just been living life and just taking time to enjoy where I'm at the best that I can. One thing I've been getting to do a lot again this year has been going to concerts, which I've always loved. I've always been a really big concert goer. About this time last year, I got the chance to see one of my favorite artists live, and it was just such a blast. It was at this really small venue that's a newer venue, I think, in Denver. I was at the very front. I got there not even that early. It was just such a small venue. I could get in the front pretty easily, which was really fun. And man, just had such a really cool experience. And one of the really humorous parts of doing this podcast is I get to cold message, if you will, some of my guests that I have on the show. A lot of these guests I don't end up knowing personally. Some of them I do. But some of these professional guests or of the sort, I don't know. And so I cold call them and just say, hey, any chance you'd be interested? And I take risks in asking people to be on the show that sometimes I just know going in that there's not going to be any interest. And that's okay because it's still really fun. But I took a chance and I randomly messaged this artist that I got to see. And lo and behold, here we are now. Nick is a phenomenal musician. Check out the bio in the episode description to read about all of his accolades. And I just strongly encourage you guys to check out his music. It's so fun. It's very great. Wingtip was in my top 5 artists on Spotify last year. And so this was just such a fun and really special experience for me. And I hope that reflects in the interview, that you guys get to feel some of that. Okay. But yeah, I think that about does it for me. I'm trying to avoid doing the long intros anymore. I just want to encourage you guys to read the episode descriptions and get an idea of who I'm talking with, but I want to save you guys some ear space from me yapping. Okay. But welcome back. I appreciate all of you who listen and who take the time to check in and learn something new with this. So I'm shooting for new episodes for most Wednesdays, if not every Wednesday. Make sure to follow the podcast to get those notifications of when I do release an episode on whatever platform you're listening to. And stay updated. Follow me on social media. My main handle is @JoshKorak, and then the podcast handle is @CareWithKorak. But I think that about does it. Let's not waste any more time and get into it. This is Care with Korak with Nick from Wingtip. That's awesome, man. Yeah, I got to see you live for the first time back in, when was it? December of last year.
Whereabouts?
Larimer Lounge in Denver.
Oh yeah,
yeah,
that was a cool show.
Yeah,
that was fun. There was a night that a bunch of my friends were there. I don't know if that was the night that you were there.
Cool.
But there were some people with like a big sign and stuff, which probably looked like maybe fans, but it was in fact
fun.
Friends.
Yeah. That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
Well, cool. Anyway. Yeah, no, so yeah, I'm grateful that we got the chance to meet and sit down and talk, and for your willingness to do something like this. So
yeah, I'm excited to do it. Happy to be here.
Man. Yeah. Well, cool. Well, I usually just like to start off just by having you introduce yourself a little bit. For me, it's one thing where I'm like, gosh, this is one of my favorite artists, and sometimes for others, I'm like, oh, dude, you were in my top 5 Spotify last year.
Yeah,
so
thank you. That's awesome.
This is really fun.
That's so surreal.
Yeah, no, this is really cool. Fun. So for me, it's like, oh my gosh, this is awesome. For other people, they're like, who's Wingtip? And so, which is fun because I've also been like, getting to share that. So, if you could just take a little bit and just introduce yourself and say a little bit about where you're at now in life.
Yeah, so I'm an artist that goes by Wingtip. I'm a songwriter, producer, musician. I have been in a bunch of different things over the years. When I started as Wingtip, I was a DJ and was making kind of dance, electronic music. And over the years, I've switched more to kind of live, instrumental, band, rock and roll kind of sounding stuff. And yeah, you can listen to my music on Spotify. You can hopefully catch me on the road next year. That's
sweet.
Who I am.
Yeah. Are you going on tour again?
Planning on it. Yeah. I don't have anything right now fixed. I wanted to take this year. Last year we meaning me. I always say that. I don't know why. Anyway, it's always I was on the road.
Yeah.
A bunch, and you mentioned that you saw me in Denver. It's like I remember. I think it was in fact in Denver, playing and thinking like, okay, this is the 3rd time this year that I've been to Denver. And it's
really? Yeah.
Most people don't even see, which I love. Love Denver. I had a great time. But yeah, I was like, I don't see people aren't seeing like Taylor Swift 3 times in a year. I'm like, let's give them a break.
Yeah.
Maybe we take a year out.
Yeah.
And so I think took this year to write and work on some other projects and whatever. And then I think probably early next year, don't quote me, but that seems pretty likely to do another one. So
sweet, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cause you have a new EP coming out, right?
Yes. In about exactly a month's time, I think from tomorrow, which I'm really excited about. Yeah.
Yeah. And that'll line up
lots
nice.
more after that as well. So,
yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. I'm stoked.
Yeah. And that'll be like good timing too. Cause I'm hoping to maybe start releasing this I don't know if we'll get quite to August
Cool.
yet, but maybe September-ish. So it'll be hopefully
Yeah,
a little
yeah,
after
yeah.
it comes out. But
Whenever.
yeah. Well, sweet. Yeah. And I think that brings up a good question, what you're saying earlier, too. Like, whenever I've been really excited and sharing this with my friends, like, I get an interview with you, and they're like, oh, well, yeah, well, what style of music does he do? And I'm like, that's kind of hard to say sometimes. Like, it's like
I
pop and
know.
like,
Well,
you know,
what do you say? You say
well,
pop usually?
I was like, it's pop, but it's not like traditional pop. Like, I feel like
Hmm.
pop is just like, I mean, that's just a three-letter word that could describe so much music. So I don't know.
Yeah.
I was like, it's pop, but it's kind of DJ-y, like, but it's not like typical electronic music. So I'm curious, like, how do you go
Yeah.
about describing your music, and
Oh
how's
man.
that developed for you as an artist?
Yeah. I always struggle with it, and I always struggle with it too because I don't. Whenever people ask, I think it's like a well-intended question, and they mean it. It's like sometimes people tell me they make music, and I'll ask them the same question. So it's
Sure,
like I
yeah.
get that people mean it in this way. That's just trying to be friendly,
And maybe it's
but
a shitty
it's always
question. Yeah.
well, I don't know, but it's like it's the question of like, oh, where do you work? Oh, do you like it? It's that kind of thing where
Yeah,
it's like,
yeah.
no one has a great answer to that. But
Sure,
I
yeah.
usually say these days, which I think probably I'm underselling it sometimes, or I just seem like unenthusiastic. When people are like, "What kind of music?" and I usually say like the three words are indie pop rock. That's usually some combination. So I'm like
Yeah,
pop
okay.
rock,
I could see
like
that.
indie
Yeah.
pop rock.
Yeah.
Sometimes I say like electronic indie pop kind of stuff.
Yeah, definitely.
And sometimes I'm like, if you listen to it, you would recognize it. Because
Yeah.
a lot of the time when people go like, oh, it's so hard to describe the music I make, it can come off really pretentious and like,
Sure.
you're like,
Yeah.
no one's ever done anything like this. And I'm
Yeah.
like, I think it's cool. I think what I'm doing is original, but I'm aware that I'm not like,
Well, I
a
think it
one
is
of
unique
one
though.
ever, yeah.
It is
I
unique
appreciate
though.
it. Yeah,
Like there's
for sure.
because then they're like, oh, well, what artist does he sound like? I'm like, I don't know. Like, and it is hard for me to think of. I'm like, oh, is he like Quinn 92? He's not really like that. Like, is
Yeah.
he like, and it is a
Yeah.
unique style of
Well,
blended
yeah, it's nice of you to
instruments,
say.
and yeah,
Yeah, I appreciate that.
yeah,
Yeah, it's always, I think I've realized like when people ask that question, they don't really care what the answer is,
sure,
unless it's
yeah,
like super out there. If you're like, if I told people just looking the way I look, like, yeah, I'm a rapper, I think they'd like have follow-up questions.
sure,
But yeah, when I tell people that indie pop rock, they kind of go like,
yeah,
yeah, okay,
yeah.
and
That's
then
fair.
sometimes they listen to it and they're like, oh, it's cool or whatever. But
Yeah,
yeah, it's not usually like
yeah.
super out there.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious, I'm aware that you probably get asked a lot of these kind of questions a lot as a music artist. And so I don't want to,
I'm happy to know whatever you want to know.
beat an old war drum here, but like I'm curious just a little bit about your story and just how you got into the music scene, and how,
Yeah.
You lived your life in a way that all of a sudden you're a big music artist now, and you get to live life doing music. And
Yeah.
what's that story been like?
So yeah, it's been a minute now. I started when I was in high school. I was in bands and stuff. I was playing guitar in bands and I was singing a little bit. Um, and it's a cliche to say like I've always loved music, but I have always just like really loved music. And I started getting guitar lessons when I was 6, um, voluntarily, like not my parents making me, but I
Oh,
was like,
that's awesome. Yeah.
some other kid was playing guitar, and I just thought that was really cool. I was
Yeah.
like drawn to it, and so I started taking guitar lessons when I was like 6 years old, and just love like music. Just has always like meant a lot to me. And I don't know, soundtracks my life, as cliched as that is. And so anyway, in high school. I was in bands, and like the favorite times of my adolescence and everything were um going to like music festivals, especially because that was like early on. That was a rare time that you could like be really out of the chaperoning of your parents. When I was
Sure.
like 13, 14.
Yeah.
It was like there was this one music festival that was like an hour south of San Francisco where I grew up. And when I was that age, and it was like early, it started at probably 11 a.m. and ended at like 8 or 9. And so my
Oh,
parents were
wow.
cool. It was like I'd be home by 10.
Yeah.
It's all good. They knew where I was. It was all ages. And so, yeah, and it was like, so I grew up going to that. And I remember seeing, and this was like this really pivotal moment. There used to be, I don't even know if it still exists, this festival, but at this festival, there was this like dance tent, like DJ music tent. And this is
Oh,
back
cool. Yeah.
in a long time ago. This is probably back in like 2008 when I was like in eighth grade. So somewhere around there, like 2008, 2009. Would go, and it was like right when EDM was like taking off in the States. And it
Hmm.
was like this really specific, amazing moment where it just really did feel like, wow, I don't know, I had never heard anything like that before. I never like experienced that kind of show
Yeah.
where it's just so like kinetic and I don't know, exciting and everything else. And I just became obsessed with it. My friends and I were just like obsessed with dance music, obsessed with DJing, obsessed with like all of that stuff, going to as many shows as we could, and inevitably like just got really into making it
Hmm.
because it was like, what else are you gonna do when you're
Sure.
14 and have a lot of time, right? Like,
Yeah.
and so started watching like everything just happened kind of perfectly in this way where it was like I was getting really into dance music. YouTube happened to be like really taking off, and so there were all these tutorials and lessons on YouTube about how to like make XYZ sound and Skrillex and all that stuff. And then you would make your songs and then you just like put them on YouTube. And there was this whole loop. And I just like, yeah, I was obsessed with it. And I would just like come home from school every day uh, and just like, blow off everything else and just work on music, like beats and stuff, like mostly dance music, EDM, house music, dubstep, all that stuff.
Yeah.
Um, just like obsessively, and I got pretty good, and I stopped wanting to do anything in bands because like the other thing about bands is you gotta really, everyone has to be on the same page and everyone has to like care about it as much as you do. And
Hmm.
when I was in high school, I just like I really really wanted it.
Yeah.
And not even in a bad way, but like most most of the people I was playing with did not want
Hmm.
it to the same degree, right?
Sure.
And so I was just like, oh, I found this thing where I can devote 100% of my time and I'm not relying on somebody else to like,
Hmm.
play the
Yeah.
drum part or the bass part. Anyway, so yeah, I got really into that. It was really cool. It was like a way into all these things in high school. Um, DJ'd a bunch in high school, just at like parties and dances and stuff like that. And just people liked it. And it was like all these great things. And then in college, I just kept doing that. I had like a brief what you would call maybe like a real career doing it. Like it just a lot of timing went right, and I would like fly out and play frats and like
Oh, cool. Yeah.
college, unions and stuff like that. For their like spring fling or whatever.
Sure.
Um, and did that for a while, and then that for various reasons kind of like wound down. And right as I was about to graduate college, this is probably 2016, I started Wingtip, and Wingtip started as a dance music thing. I was just making
Hmm.
like disco house beats, and I was living in New York, and I just really wanted to be like a club DJ that played
Yeah.
disco music. That's like really what I wanted to be. And the origin of the name Wingtip was because I really wanted to. I thought it'd be cool to as a stage gag wear like these shiny chrome wingtips on stage and like a suit and have it just be that was like
Yeah.
the idea. Yeah, it was pretty silly. And I did it one time, my first maybe ever show.
Oh,
I did it.
really?
And then I realized that most of the time you're standing behind a DJ booth and people aren't going to see your shoes. So it's like not a great gig.
Well, would you ever do
It's
it
not a great.
again?
I think it'd be fun to. I'm trying to experiment a little bit with like fashion and outfits when I
Yeah.
play shows now, and
Yeah,
yeah, it could
man.
be fun.
You're out of the DJ
Um,
booth now, so.
I know, yeah. People do often when I'm playing shows, my feet are at about eye level, and so
Hmm.
yeah, it's probably a good idea to get some cool footwear. But yeah, and then that's what I was doing in kind of like right when I graduated and making those kinds of things, and just one thing led to another. It was like working out a little bit, putting it up on SoundCloud and Hype Machine and all that kind of stuff, and things were just like dots were connecting a little bit.
Yeah.
And then I put out this song with a friend of mine called Rewind that just like,
Mm.
everybody says this and it sounds like generic and like it can't possibly happen that way, but it really did, where it was like, I did not plan on it at all. I put it out. I didn't
Hmm.
think, I thought it was a cool song, but I didn't think it was like huge or anything. And took off in a major way, and was getting I don't know, like 1 million streams a week or something, and
Oh wow, man.
everything from there. I mean, that's kind of like where the career part of everything
Yeah.
started. And so that took off. Very sort of cool time. Signed a major deal, signed a pub deal, moved out to LA, started working with all these songwriters and producers, and yeah, and everything's kind of just been a development on that since.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of that was the long and short, but mostly pretty long of the background.
No, that was good, man. Yeah. What was that like for
Cool.
you when that first song Rewind blew up?
Really weird. Really
Yeah.
weird. Yeah, I wish more people got to experience this kind of thing. I know that sounds
Mm.
maybe silly, but um it's very surreal. Like I think if you're working on something for a long time, like I said, when I was in high school and stuff, I just wanted like a moment
Yeah.
so bad.
Yeah.
I was just like so hungry for that. I would always like play a show and it'd be like four people, two of whom were like my parents, and I would come off stage and I'd just be like, oh, I want to do that again right now. Like I need to be, I want it to be bigger. I want it to be what I mean. And yeah, I was just always waiting for that moment. And then kind of out of nowhere, it starts to happen, and it
Mm.
happens, it almost always, especially in music and entertainment in general, it happens really fast.
Right.
Um, you're not maybe all the way prepared for it, and it can catch you off guard. And it did catch me a little bit off guard in the sense that like, I was really excited and I felt like I deserved it on some level, or like, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I want this, etc. But you start to, when that kind of thing happens and real money gets involved, right? Like real people with jobs and offices and stuff get
Right.
involved. You can feel an intense pressure to like sustain that, right? And I
Mm.
think beyond that, even just the people that you're trying to sort of impress or the people that you're trying to please, I think there's this pressure for yourself too of like, okay, all of a sudden I'm this guy, right? And it's really easy to fall into this trap, I think. It's not even a trap, but it's fall into this like mindset when all this stuff is happening. Um, where you're like, okay, I'm a successful musician. That's who I am because this happened. And
Mm.
so that's who I am to the world. And the world briefly kind of confirms that for you because people are taking you really seriously. You're getting a lot of opportunities. You're getting
Right.
money. You're getting like, everyone's really friendly. And so, yeah, you're like, I mean, I was 22. This happens to a lot of people when they're 16 or even younger. It's like, it's really easy to just be like, oh, yeah, I totally deserve all this. And like, this is who I am, is a
Mm.
successful musician, a successful person.
Yeah.
And it's like, I knew that. I knew that it was going on when it was happening and I was signing, but that didn't mean that it didn't happen, you know?
Mm.
Um, and so I think it was a real, particularly like, you know, a year after, 6 months to a year after, there's this moment where you're like, okay, I gotta follow it up, and I had all these amazing moments, all these really cool things. One of which was I played the music festival that I went to as a kid
No
and saw
way.
all of these people, uh, who had performed on that stage. I played on that same stage. It's like, that's it, right? Like
Yeah, that's the
and
moment.
I enjoyed it, but I was so caught up in like
Mm.
the day before the song that I had put out right after Rewind, like I hadn't done as well as Rewind. And
Mm.
it was so like jarring and bothersome to who I was that like, and I was like, well, now I can't let myself enjoy this moment. I
Yeah.
don't know. And I had a lot of that, of
Mm.
like these really cool things that in retrospect, I'm like, that was
Right.
awesome. And I should have just enjoyed it. Um,
Was that
but I
feeling there
didn't,
like disappointment or?
I think it was more like, I think it's your identity again. It's like, this
Mm.
is who I am.
Yeah.
And so then when you're like, oh, if that's not it, what am I? And like,
Mm.
what have I done? I don't know. And so, and you feel this pressure to like to live up to that to the people around you. Um,
Yeah.
you know, to be like this popular, exciting
Mm-hmm.
artist. I remember when I played another, like that year, I played a bunch of these festivals and I played Lollapalooza, which is another like
Yeah.
huge bucket list moment. And I had the feeling of like, I don't want to celebrate too much. I don't want to like show that I'm too excited about this because I want people around me to be like, oh, this is just the beginning.
Mm.
And this sounds probably kind of silly, but that is really what I wanted. I was like, would whoever, I don't know. For some reason, this is like not irrelevant, but for some reason in my mind, I was like, would P. Diddy be excited about playing at this time? It's so
Sure.
stupid. But it is really that thing of just like, oh, I want people around me to think that I am the best, the biggest, the
Yeah.
whatever. And so I didn't want to be like, oh, this is so great. I'm so excited because I wanted them to think like, wow, he's not even excited about this. That means
Right.
he wants to go to the top, and
Mm.
that's what you're trying to project.
Right.
So yeah, that was where my head was at for like a long time after
Yeah.
that song. And then for good and for bad, I think a lot of really cool things happened too.
Yeah.
But yeah.
What has that journey been like for you to, because I'm hearing that there's been a journey to kind of detach a little bit of your value in being maybe a popular musician, and
Yeah,
kind of
totally.
refining your self-identity in maybe just who you are rather than like what you do. What does that journey
Yeah.
look like for you?
I like that phrasing of it. Yeah, I think you inevitably have a confrontation. Like, no matter how successful you ever get,
Mm.
um, you're gonna have failure, right? And you're gonna have probably like pretty profound failure at some point.
Sure.
And for me, a couple years after I had signed this major deal and whatever, I had put out my first like ever EP with Republic, who was like a big deal, whatever label, and song after song on that EP when I was putting them out individually, like song after song was just not taken. It just wasn't really working.
Mm.
And progressively, I was like, just holding on. And I put up tickets for my first ever headline tour. That was supposed to be like right after the EP came out, so winter 2018. And I'll never forget the day. Like it was one day, and a lot of the time that's how it happens. It's like
Mm.
one crystallizing moment of fame.
Right.
Where my manager called and was like, "Hey, listen, the EP had just come out, and it hadn't done well, and we had asked Republic to maybe change teams because we thought maybe that would help. Like
Mm.
different new blood, they would know better what to do or something." Um, and my manager called me and he's like, "Hey, we talked to them about this. We asked for new teams, and they said that they're not interested in going forward with this project anymore
With
at
your
all.
EP,
With no, with Wingtip,
with Wingtip in
100%.
general. Oh,
With the
wow.
Wingtip in general,
Yeah.
they were dropping me. They were done.
Oh, wow, man.
Which was something that I'd always been like worried about and nervous about, but it
Mm.
never all the way
Yeah.
happened. And and then on that same phone call, he goes, "Oh, and by the way, I've been looking at the ticket numbers for this headline tour, and you know, I think just given probably where your head's at and where music and everything is at, like, I think we should probably cancel this headline." I was like 2 weeks out from the headline.
Wow.
He's like, "I think we should cancel it." So back to back, it was just like, oh, I don't know. I that day I got in bed at like 3 in the afternoon, and I think Googled like how to know if you should quit or something.
Yeah.
Like it
Yeah.
was it was really rough. And the overwhelming feeling, or one of the like really dominant thoughts that I was having was I was like, I don't have anything anymore that sets me apart from everybody else, in the sense
Mm.
that I don't know. I don't have a major record label behind me. I'm not selling any ticket. Like I'm no different from the guy making guitar in his living room
Right.
or his bedroom or whatever and uploading it. Like And it's scary because you're like, how am I going to pay rent? Like that part is scary because you're
like the practical
oh my
things
God,
of it. Yeah.
the practical things, but then also just like the existential things of like,
Yeah.
oh man, is anyone going to care about me? This was like a thing that a lot of people thought was really cool about me. And now I don't have it. Am I going to like lose friends and
Right.
lose opportunities and all of those things? And just like self-respect, like, I don't know, just am I the person that I thought I was? And yeah. And that was I wish I had an answer for like, and then somebody said something really profound.
Right. Then you figured it all out and your life
And
is
I
like
figured it
perfect
all
now.
out.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And the good news is like in a lot of ways, things did work out and they did
Sure.
like come together in another way. But there wasn't a moment in there, you know, it was sort of like years, honestly, of not being totally sure and just kind of like getting used to that feeling.
Yeah.
And then also really trying to identify the other reasons that I do music besides like being a cool, popular musician.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
the reasons that it's interesting and exciting that don't have to do with the ups and downs of your career. Because I think it's really easy to get lost in that and realizing that it's like it's a practice too, where I still will often have a lot of moments where I feel frustrated or like a failure or something and have to like mine for the reason that it all is worth it and the reason that I got into it in the first place and was excited about it, right? Like, yeah. And you know, it's still to this day.
Yeah. Well, and that was, one of my questions too, and I think you're even answering it without me even having to ask it, but like, what does this role of like imposter syndrome kind of play for you?
Yeah,
as
I
an
mean,
artist?
Yeah, it's been pretty significant in a lot of, I mean, it's like also I feel like I make the joke sometimes of like not everyone can have imposter syndrome. Like someone's got to actually be bad at their job.
Sure. Yeah.
Like
That's a good one.
I think I think you know when especially when I started again um back in like 2017 when I was very first doing music professionally and I was being put into a lot of these songwriting rooms where you're going into a room with two or three other people who are professional songwriters and producers whose job it is basically to like work with people like you and make a song that ideally is going to be a hit,
Sure.
right, for the label or whoever. And I'd never done that, period. Like I'd barely written a song when I started doing that. I'd really like written one song by the time that kind of stuff started. And so I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't really know how you're supposed to like be, what the protocol was, like any of that. So there's a lot of imposter syndrome and just like, oh man, I think like I probably shouldn't be here. Like really, because I was just like, I don't even know how to do this. Like, why am I here? And I think I spoke about this a little bit, but yeah, like one of the things is that I did that I sort of regret, and that is a piece of advice that I often give to people who are like just starting out in songwriting, especially, is I think to compensate for like that feeling of insecurity of like, what am I doing here? And I don't really know what makes a good song. And to compensate, I tried to project this thing of like, I'm the best, you know? And like, I know exactly what I'm doing and I have this like huge career or whatever, you know, like,
yeah.
And I really wanted to prove to everybody I was working with that I was like amazing.
And confident.
And I think, and confident, yeah. And in retrospect, I think what I have realized from that experience and from doing that a lot and having it not always work or just like not producing the results I was hoping for is that in a lot of settings, a lot of collaborative settings, but particularly something like songwriting, it's really not about like success in it is really not about being the best. It's really not. It's like there are so many people I know who are wickedly talented, whatever, songwriters, musicians, producers, instrumentalists, but they're like dominant and intense and stubborn and like driven by their ego. And like everybody has bad ideas sometimes, right? Like you're going to have to kind of give space and give room for your ideas to be bad.
Sure.
And every day is really different when you're trying to do something creative. And if you can't go into a room and go, you know what, today this person has a cool idea and it's better than anything I could have done. And that's the idea for the day. Like that's just what we have to do, because yeah, it's not about you. It's about something bigger than you. It's about a song. It's about creativity. But you
Oh,
can't
wow.
get to that if you're like, you can't get to that if you're like, no, I need to prove to everybody that I am the man.
Right.
And so it took me like, I would say a couple of years to start getting that, because I was experiencing this thing too of like, oh, people don't really want to like work with me again. And this guy got this thing that I'm more talented than him. Whether or not that's true, but like that's what I felt. I was like, I'm more talented than him, or whatever. And he got this opportunity. Like, why don't I get that? And one of the things that I felt and I realized was like, oh, when I worked with that guy who got that opportunity, he was like really nice and really kind of warm and receptive to ideas, made me feel super comfortable and at home. And gave me like space to be creative and have fun and whatever. And I didn't get this like intensity from him. And I realized like, oh yeah, like a lot of the ways you get opportunities for creative things and other things is like, it's less about like, wow, that guy smashed and was the best.
Right.
It's like, no, that guy's like pretty good and is like nice to be around. And I know he'll be cool in this. So let's bring him in. Right. Or her or whatever. But like,
sure.
Yeah, that I think, again, going back to just the imposter syndrome, it's like, I think we tend to overrate in almost every domain. Like we really tend to overrate like pure skill and talent as the thing that separates the people that do well from not. And more often than not, it's not that. It's like affability and like ability to work in a team and support other people and to establish boundaries, like just all these things that have nothing to do with like how good is your melody ability.
You really notice that in your experiences that they would overrate skill and undervalue humility.
Yeah, it's not even so much like humility, but that's definitely part of it. I think it's like,
is it maybe more like relational, like just the relationship that you build with the
relational
people? Yeah,
it's totally, it's like you reach a certain point in music where it's like, all right, as far as collaboration and stuff,
sure,
everybody's good enough. You're not walking into a room. I've never walked, I can't think at least of a time that I've ever walked into the room and been like, this person's
sure.
There are like better and worse, right? Like some people you're like, wow, that guy's like amazing. And sometimes you're like, yeah, that guy's pretty good.
Right.
But I can't think of a time when I've worked with someone that I was like, whoa. Because to get in the door is so competitive. It's like, to even just get in the door, you got to be like somewhat good. And so once you're past that point, it's like, okay, we don't need to show to other people that we're really good. And so, you can be the guy in the room that's like, that's not good enough. It's fun to be that guy who's like, no, that's not it. We got to keep going and like really push everyone and dominate and be like, I'm the one who's going to decide when we have a good idea. But every time I've been in a situation with a person doing that, I leave the session usually being like, I don't like that very much. That was not very fun for me.
Yeah.
And like, okay, I don't know if I want to work with them again. So,
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So relationships end up just being really important as part of the creative process for you and with your projects. Yeah.
I think also like something that I'm still working on and I find really difficult is when you're working with people, being able to confront them, not even confront them in like, oh, you did something wrong. There are going to be days when I have friends that I love, that I adore, that I'll work with a lot. And there are going to be days, even if you're like, we're really good collaborators, we've worked together a lot, we've written good songs together. There are going to be days when you just write a bad song and it's like no one's fault. But there's so much, everyone, including me, like everyone is so insecure that anytime you write a bad song, you're just like shit, you know?
Right.
Like, they're never gonna want to work with me again, and whatever.
Mm.
And a lot of the time, it's like you don't even acknowledge it. You don't even go like, "Oh, that sounds kind of a doozy." Oh, well, you know, we'll get them next
Right.
time, because it's like this thing that you're like you don't want to jinx. You know, it's like just
Mm.
keep the good vibes and whatever. And I'm like I said, I'm still working on it. I think I have gotten better at being like, you know, like sometimes in the middle of the song, just sort of be like, I don't. This isn't do you like this? I don't. You know, like, is this inspiring to you? And a lot of the time, if you're not feeling inspired, they'll be like, yeah, it's not. I don't know. It's like not
Yeah.
really it. And I'm like, yeah, okay. You know what? Like, why don't we go get coffee and just like hang
Yeah.
out for the rest of the day? It's
Yeah.
fine. We don't need, and not every day needs to be, you know, the like greatest songwriting day of all time. Especially,
Right.
it's like I've realized it's like we're so hard sometimes on other people or like ourselves in a certain circumstance, and then it's like, well, do I expect that every time I write a song alone that it's going to be the
Mm.
greatest song I've ever written? Like, no,
Yeah.
right? So why do I expect that like randomly when I'm writing with somebody else, it's going to always be the best?
Yeah. You
And
just feel more
working
of
on
that
that,
pressure when you're with other people and
yeah, I think one
collaborating.
of the hardest things is collectively admitting not failure. It's not a failure. It's just
Mm.
being like, this isn't it. We'll
Mm.
get it. Because what you're really saying with that is like, I trust you. I think you are good, and I trust you to next time do it and to get something. But that
Right.
can be so hard, especially when you're like building, you know. I always like writing a song with somebody a lot of the time early on when you've like just met them. It's so much like dating, right?
Mm.
It's like when you're on a first date, second date, third date, whatever. You like it's so hard to be like, this isn't, you know, you're like trying to make a good impression and you're trying to be like the best
Sure.
version of yourself, the best
Yeah.
writer version of yourself, whatever. And so it's like it's so hard to step out of that and be like, okay, but let's be real for two
Mm.
seconds and just like acknowledge the reality of the room right now. Like we're not
Right.
getting anything. Let's just let's like table this and
Yeah.
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 So
Speaking of dating, man, gosh, so many of your songs seem to be like so relationship based, like so built off of
I
dating
know.
and
They're
girls.
no,
Like,
I'm really trying to
no,
write
no,
something else.
not a bad thing, but like Nick,
No, I know you
who
don't mean
hurt
that
you,
way.
man? Like,
So
what?
many people. No,
Yeah,
nobody. I mean,
no, no. I'm curious though. Like, I mean, obviously those are big themes in your songs. Like,
yeah,
can you just share a little bit more about that? Like, what that's like as part of the songwriting process for you?
yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, it's funny. They are so many of my songs. Uh, a friend of mine who I've known for like 10 years came to my show in New York a little while ago, and he's like a casual listener of mine, but he's not like a fan or anything. But he was like, you know, I never like really listened to the lyrics of your songs before, but I feel like the two things you talk about are like hating LA and failed relationships. And I was like,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah, that is like 90% of them. Which is like not my life necessarily, but it's
sure,
just
sure,
I think it's interesting. Like a lot of people ask, you know, when I'm talking to fans or just people like you or whatever, like
sure.
people are always like, how much of that is that autobiographical? Is that, and it's especially really cool
Mm,
when people tell me this really resonated with me. This really specifically meant something to me and
yeah,
like got me through a hard time or put into words or put into some kind of idea, this thing that I was experiencing.
me.
Um, yeah, well, that's awesome. Like, that's always really cool to hear. And so I always am like, well, I don't want to disappoint and be like, oh, it's all made up.
Oh,
It's
sure,
not all made up in the sense that like I've had a lot of relationship difficulties in my 20s, and a lot of them have like found their way into songs. So
sure.
it's not
Yeah,
like I'm like married and blissful and then writing these sad breakup songs and I'm
right.
like, it's all a fabric. Like, I've definitely lived a lot of the stuff I write about. A lot of the time when I write, and it's not even always intentional, um, I try usually. I was talking to a friend about this actually recently because he was like, he's a songwriter too, and he was like, we were comparing kind of the ways that we write, and he was like, I feel like I write about what happened, and you write about how it felt when it happened.
Mm,
And I was like, yeah, that's true. I
yeah,
don't try to do that, but that is sort of what it is. Where like to me, it's interesting because like to me, songwriting isn't about a lot of people like songwriting is my therapy. Songwriting is my
mm,
whatever, and they get really specific about like what happened, you
Yeah.
know. And to me, I don't aspire to that. Like I don't try to do like, okay, this, we went to this coffee shop and you said this and then this happened. It's like I, in a good and a bad way, especially when you are on the bad end of a relationship, one's ending, and you're feeling sad, the gift of that is a really
Mm.
beautiful openness in some
Yeah.
way. If you look for it, like you just, you're feeling, you're like, you're so sad, and being sad sucks, but it
Mm.
is also a gift because it's very life affirming. You're
It's
like,
part of the
you
human
care about
experience.
something.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
And you kind of want to just talk about it. Just the feeling for me more than like what happened. And what's funny is like a lot of the time when I'm writing, both on my own and especially with other people, a lot of the time when I'm writing, like I won't start being like, I want to talk about this today. This thing happened to me, and this is where I want to go with it, right? A lot of the time, it'll just be like, well, let's just like see what happens, and I'll like hum a lyric maybe, right? And whatever, I'll like come up with some words for it, and then look, when you look at it on the page, you're like, oh, it's like, yeah, this just happened to me.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes
Yeah.
sense. This was like bubbling right under my conscious brain, and it like just came out. And then what's funny too is like sometimes, um, it's like sometimes it's like not even actually what you're feeling. Like a story that I think is funny is there's a song called "Hope They Love You," and it's like this kind of,
Oh
you know,
shit,
for
man.
those who don't know,
No, that's
but
just funny because that's my favorite song. Probably that's probably the song.
okay,
That,
amazing.
yeah.
Well, I hope you enjoy the story.
Yeah.
So that I wrote with a friend of mine right after like the most significant breakup I've ever had. I was really like, yeah,
Mm.
that was very upsetting. It was really challenging, and it was like peak COVID too. So
Yeah.
I like wasn't doing anything, couldn't get out of the house, and it was just like it was really rough. And the feelings I was having about the breakup, like I was sort of one of the things that was challenging about it was that even though I was really angry and upset and hurt, it was like we broke up for these reasons that I sort of understood and felt some degree of like sympathy for. And so I was like, well, I don't know. And so when I was writing the song with this friend, I I swear this is true. I don't know. It sounds to me like it's made up, but it is really true.
Sure.
I was like, she was like, do you have any ideas? And I was like, yes, I have this idea, and uh, it's like I hope somebody loves you the way you loved me. Right? That was the idea.
Mm.
And my pitch on it, and sometimes you gotta like pitch the songs a little bit.
Yeah.
She's like, well, what does that mean? And I was like, well, the idea being like, even though in the end it was bad and tough, like it meant so much and it was such a good experience and it was so positive, blah blah blah. Like I hope you get that with somebody else. You know, it was kind of like it was like supposed to be like a sweet song, like Frank Ocean's Godspeed or something, where it's really like,
oh, that was the
go
original
out,
intention.
be happy.
Yeah.
That was the original intention. That was what I had in mind.
Sure.
For real. Was
yeah.
just like, I think, yeah, it would just be like, go find your peace. Go, you know, I hope somebody loves you the way you loved me. It was really great.
Yeah.
And my friend who rules and like talk about, you know, having a good friend who's willing to like say the hard stuff in a writing session or whatever was like, I don't know if people want to hear that. Like, I don't know if that's like interesting and like, I don't know if that's like particularly cathartic. What if we did like, I hope somebody treats you really badly because that's how you treated me. And I was like, and at first I was like, I don't know, like I don't want to upset her, and I don't want to like, you know, that feels kind of addictive, whatever. But then she was just like, just stick it out, and like we can always change it, but just like see how it goes. And it was one of those that like once I was like, okay, let's just like write it. Came out like that.
Yeah.
And I realized in doing it, I was like, oh, I was feeling this very intensely.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like embarrassed to write about it or embarrassed to like express it because it felt like petty and mean and angry. And I'm like, I don't want to be that guy. I want to be like graceful and magnanimous and like nice. But sometimes you got to just like write the fucking song that's mean and it's like, it's still a good song. And like, you do feel it. And and yeah, like I said, like once we kind of agreed on that premise, the song just like wrote itself. And I too I was like, oh, I love this. This is
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
And I was nervous when it was coming out, and I was like, should I tell her? Should I text her? And I ended up deciding not to. But I stand behind that song. Like a lot of people, that's one of those where every time I play it, I see this recognition in people, and they really respond to it. And it's like, yeah, a song doesn't have to be like your whole person. It doesn't have to be like everything. It can be like something that you felt one time.
Yeah.
And you get it out. And
or an aspect of the relationship, or
an aspect of the relationship. It doesn't have to be the whole thing. And that was useful as an exercise to do, because like I feel like definitely since then I've had an easier time being like, well, I'm just going to inhabit this like one space narratively, you know, like I'm going to just check that version out. Yeah. And it doesn't mean it's like the whole thing of me. Yeah. And that's given me a lot more sort of creative freedom to just to write stuff that like I maybe otherwise wouldn't, like I can write stuff that I wouldn't say to somebody, you know. Sure. Yeah. In both directions. So yeah.
I think that's something I've been able to appreciate about that song in particular. I think it's just funny, like the timelines of it in the shared experience here. Like for me, it was something where I got out of a long-term relationship that was really meaningful, and kind of similar feelings. Like, you know, it was really good in a lot of ways, but just like also really bad and unhealthy in a lot of ways. And you know, for a while, you know, outside of the song, like it was just easier, I think, to like villainize this person that I dated. Right? Of course.
That's we always do that.
Yeah. Right. And it's easier to do that because it's, I think, way more difficult for us to confront the complexity of, you know, humans and the human experience and relationships. And the reality is that there was just so much complexity in dating relationships completely in this person. And so for me, it was, you know, really helpful as a song to be able to tap into that one side of it and just, this like, fuck you song like that, you know, this relationship was really hurtful and in a lot of ways, and to tap into that and allow myself to grieve and experience that. And then also to get out of that headspace sometimes and recognize, like villainizing her, that would be the easier way to go. But to recognize the complexities of this person and people in general that we date and maybe who the songs are after.
There are other songs for that.
Right.
You know? It's like, no, totally. And so and that's awesome to hear. That's really, really cool. Yeah.
There can be the space for maturity of looking at those complexities. But I think what I was able to appreciate, especially as like a young adult, like, you know, younger than I am now.
You seem like a young guy. But I know what you mean.
So, you know, I was just able to appreciate just having something to connect with and being in that space of just acknowledging the hurt that happened in that relationship. And so,
I think too,
it's really nice.
Totally. That's really awesome to hear. Yeah. I think also like a lot of people, especially if you're like a nice, thoughtful person, which you seem like you are, it's like, I don't know. I think we have a hard time. I have a hard time like getting angry about stuff, and like having that fuck you moment. And, I think having healthy outlets for that, which I would say writing a song about it is like, in the scheme of things, pretty healthy, is actually like really good. And I think like you know, anger is a totally fine thing to feel if it's not destructive and like hurting people. And it's like, and I got to have a really cool moment with it. I remember that relationship that the song is about ended in Boston, and it was like, without going into too much, it was just like, it was no fun, and I had really bad associations with Boston for a long time. And then I got to play there in 2021, December, 2021 is my first headline there, and I sold it out, and I got to play that song, and, you know, unlike before where maybe I was a little bit more in my head, I fully enjoyed that moment. It was like, this rules. I feel so good about this. Like, look what that produced. Like, look what that relationship produced.
Right. So, yeah, the lesson that came out of it, sure. Yeah. That makes sense, man. You know, a couple of quick questions. I know we're running low on time. I want to respect your time. But just questions that I've been curious about, you know. I'm curious about like what tour life is like for you, and you know, you hear different stories and how that maybe impacts your mental health and what you do maybe to support your mental health while on the road.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, the one thing about tour is it's both constantly changing as far as your life. Like every day, your basic routines are going to be disrupted, which is really hard. I think like that is, in the sense that like there's a new thing every day, right? So it's like tonight's show is at 7, then the next day it's at 8, then there's a day off, then the next one's at 9, and then the next day it's at 6. And so it's like, and then some days you have a 2-hour drive day, some days you have a 10-hour drive day. Then it just changes and changes and changes. And so really basic things that if you're living at home, you can kind of like do to stay relatively like stable and grounded, like, you know, waking up basically at the same time, exercising kind of at the same time, eating 3 meals a day kind of the same time.
Sure.
That goes out the window, right?
Oh, shoot. Yeah.
Pretty immediately. And you're getting pretty crappy sleep. There's a lot of pressure. You got to like perform most nights. Your like dietary options are really limited a lot of the time, you know, like middle of the country, middle of the nowhere, like you're getting gas station like Doritos or whatever for lunch.
Damn.
So that's the challenge of it, I think. And the fix to that is, I think, a couple things. One is within that, identifying some of the things that you can control, and some of the things that you can like you wouldn't necessarily intuitively do, but you will do because you know it's like down the road it's gonna be healthy. So one of those for me is like I need consistent 8 hours of sleep every night, pretty much. And if that means that I have to bail on like after the show, going out to drinks with the band or whatever, you got to do it. You just like you're gonna feel like a killjoy and a buzzkill and whatever. You just got to do it. And same with in the morning. It's like if I need to get half an hour of exercise roughly a day, and I'm gonna be weird and dweeby and whatever, and hit the like Best Western Fitness Center, but you got to do it.
Right.
And as best as you can too, like, like try and create some rhythm in your day, some structure in your day, something that you're, even when everything else is changing, you do the same. It doesn't even necessarily have to be at the same time, but it's like, I do this little thing every day. I take a walk around the block and I listen to music or whatever, like something that you're just like, I do this every day. And that is the thing that like keeps me there.
Yeah.
And I think the last thing too, as far as like preserving your mental health and your stamina and your just like overall clarity, I think again, it can be really hard to assert any kind of like boundary as far as needing time alone. I think tour, one of the things you don't really think about is you just never have alone time. Like you're like quasi alone a lot because you're maybe sitting on your phone or reading a book or playing a video game or something in the van.
Right.
But you're never like alone. You're never just like you could like, you can't take a phone call basically, right?
Yeah.
Without somebody listening to it.
Yeah.
And so I think one of the things for that is like recognizing that it's okay to want that. And again, finding moments, whether it's in every day, every other day, whatever, where like you will be alone for at least half an hour, right? And just can like truly whatever. You don't have to do anything, but you can just like not be around other people. So a lot of the time what it is for me is like, breakfast, sometimes there's some flexibility. You go and get breakfast and you like sit at a cafe that's empty and alone. And you're just like on your phone or you're reading a book or whatever, but you're just like no one else around.
Yeah.
Like maybe the barista, but it's a different thing. They're not paying attention.
Yep.
And you just like carve out that time for yourself. And yeah, again, it's a lot about sort of taking the socially difficult thing of saying, I'm not going to get the drinks. I'm not going to do the pre-show dinner every time. You got to do those a little bit. You don't want to be like recluse.
Sure.
But like taking the time for yourself and
recognizing what you're needing, space. What your body's needing. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that time alone is just it can be so important. I have a whole another episode about the importance of solitude. So yeah,
totally.
That's good stuff.
Yeah, it is very important.
Yeah. That's good, man. Yeah. This other question I have that I was curious about, my friend actually asked me this to ask you. Sure. He wanted to know, like, is it difficult for you to play songs that you've released previously, but maybe, I I don't know, have a different meaning to you nowadays? I mean, maybe we talked a little bit about like Hope They Love You, but he was referencing like Tyler Childers and how he has a song
Uh-huh.
about like drinking and now and that's like a triggering song for him now.
Sure.
I'm curious if there's like a
Yeah.
song for you that maybe not quite in the same way, but just has a different meaning for you now.
Um, yeah, that's a super interesting question. And yeah, I think like it goes in two ways. Like some songs, I think if it weren't for playing them, I would have kind of not forgotten about, but just like
Mm,
they wouldn't have the same meaning, right? But um, there are songs like just like Happiness, where
yeah,
it's like I don't know, that song meant something to me before, and I think going back to like all my songs are about relationships, like the chorus of that song, and like when you listen to it in context of the lyrics and stuff, like to me when I wrote that song is about just like the good times in a relationship and trying to hold
sure.
on to those, right? It's like simple. But a lot of the people that's resonated with and have come to the shows and it's meant something to, a lot of those people, it means so much more than that, you
Yeah,
know? And it's about happiness in general and just the difficulty of holding on to that and building a life for yourself. And like, in so many just like beautiful, I don't know, things on TikTok and Instagram and just people talking to people at shows where it
mm,
means it's so much in a way like deeper than that. And so it's always it's very special and important
yeah,
playing that song. And I think like if I just put it out and never played it, I wouldn't recognize it as such.
sure.
Then there's songs I think like that it's funny, there are some songs that mean a ton to you when you write them.
Mm,
Um that I rarely have this experience, but like sometimes you're like, I really need to sit down and like write this song,
yeah,
and you write it, and it's just like it means it's like a specific moment for you. Um, the one I'm thinking of, like, there's a song called "Freight Tape" that's like the last song on the first album,
mm,
and I don't have a ton of songs like this. One that when I listen to that song, I'm like, I remember exactly where I was when I wrote
mm,
that, the headspace that I was in, and it was like catharsis and difficult, and it's just like I don't know, like that song meant a lot to me, and I'm really proud of it, etc. And it's not my most popular song. I don't need everybody to love everything I've ever done,
right.
and like front to back, start to finish, standing ovation. But like it's sometimes you have those songs. Just to be honest, like you have those songs that like mean a
Hmm.
ton to you,
Yeah.
and I'll perform it and you can just feel it doesn't mean that like everybody's tuned out, but you can just feel like, okay,
Hmm.
this is really vulnerable for me.
Yeah.
And a lot of these people are like, this is the down moment. I think a lot of people really like my kind of upbeat, dancier stuff, which is
Mm,
totally fine. But so, in a lot of the times, like I'll play Freight Tape, especially on that last tour, and it's just like, oh, people are kind of like
yeah.
chatting
Yeah.
um, and yeah, that's just like it's not the end of the world. But since you asked, I'm like, yeah, that's what came to mind when I'm like
Yeah.
that song.
No, it's a good one.
It's just a little, yeah, you
Yeah.
know, it is
There's
what it
something
is.
about that vulnerability, though. I mean, part of what it means to be vulnerable is to be true to yourself, and so I
Yeah,
mean, I think it's cool that you have some of the mental strength, I guess, to be able to perform a song that maybe other people don't resonate with as well, and but you play it because
that's
it's important to
yeah,
you. You know, like it's
yeah.
this is
That's
like
what you gotta do. No,
yeah.
for sure. And like, um, I think the other thing that is so cool about playing a show and something that I think as a performer you get to experience that is that very few other people get to experience is like it's really rare to be able to see people taking you in, like taking your music in,
Mm,
experiencing things. And I think one lesson that you really learn from doing it is that you're actually like way less good at predicting how people um, felt about it than
sure.
you think you are. One of the things I remember a friend of mine gave a piece of advice that I think about a lot when I'm playing shows and stuff. And he's like, anytime you're talking to somebody after the show, whether it's the promoter, the booker, or even a fan or whoever, like even if you went up there and were like, that was awful,
Mm,
like front to back, that was humiliating and embarrassing, and I felt terrible. Don't say that to them.
mm,
You can say it to a friend later who wasn't there or whatever, but especially to a fan, I've definitely had so many shows where I'm like, that sucked, and I was so unhappy, and like, oh, I'm so embarrassed. And then I
Right.
talked to a fan after, and they're like, that was amazing. And they mean it. And they're like,
Mm.
that was great. That was so cool. And I'm like, oh yeah, if I just before they had said that, been like, that show fucking sucks. I hated that. It would have ruined it, you know?
Yeah.
And a lot of the time it's somebody that I'll be talking to somebody that I saw in the crowd who was like this with like no facial expression.
Right.
And I'm like, oh, they hate this. And then that's just how they react to things. And like,
Yeah.
you don't actually always know how people are feeling inside,
Yeah.
you know? And so.
Oh, I get that. I get that with my clients too. So.
Completely, I'm sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the same thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Who is one person that you would just love to collaborate with and feature with?
That's a great question.
Bucket list?
Whose bucket list? Give me a second. I'm gonna think about this.
That's okay.
I get asked this and sometimes. I think right now it's a bit of a cliche answer, but I really love the 1975, and I love the mind of Matty Healy. I know people have mixed feelings about him. I can acknowledge that, but I think the lyrics are just amazing, and the writing is really cool. The producing is really cool, and I just like admire it. And I would love to do something. I would love any of their input and their help, and just like you know, and
definitely, man.
But also to work with them in any capacity. Yeah, I think would be awesome.
That's awesome. Well, the way I always like to wrap up the show is just by asking you, like, what are some words of wisdom that you would want to impart with my audience, kind of pass on and wrap things up?
That's a good question. I really want like a great, you know,
super like
parable.
Yep.
I think, what would I say? I think one of the benefits of keeping on and doing something for a little while, whether it's music or anything else in life that can feel competitive and difficult, and you're going to feel behind at points. I think one of the cool things about doing it for a while and sticking with it is you notice in the big picture the ebb and flow of everything. And it really does, I can tell you, get easier to deal with the highs and lows of a career in the arts and romantic relationships and, you know, just general life stuff.
Yeah.
That you see over time, that person who was doing, who I was like, oh, I'd give anything to be that person, is now in a really tough spot. And vice versa, that person that I was like, oh, I really don't want to be that person, is now doing really well. And also with yourself, like, oh, this thing that happened to me, this song that came out that flopped, and I told myself, you know, when Heartbreak came out, this is the worst performing song I'd ever had, and now it's like my number one song. It's like, you have these moments of like, oh, I thought everything was over when that happened, and was convinced. And you know what? I didn't know. And I also, vice versa, I've had things where I've had the best week ever, and the song has taken off, and it's crushing, and it hasn't lasted. And that's not to say you should enjoy those things, but you just start to recognize, like, yeah, there's a rhythm to it, and there's a flow, and it doesn't mean that you're not gonna go on that ride still and have the ups and downs, and like they will suck and be great. But when you pay attention and you keep going and you just gather more experience, you do start to kind of deal with them a little bit better, and they smooth out. So that is what I would say.
Yeah. Thanks, Nick. I mean, God, this was so fun for me. I really appreciate
This was great.
your time.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm so glad we got the chance to do this.